we're live. We're having this exploration. We're having this conversation, and I think it's a powerful one to have with Sarah Laverty. Laverty.
Laverty. Yeah.
Oh,
Laverty.
okay, great. So, just a bit of context. Sarah and I met at a creative summit, so talking about creativity. And when I heard Sarah speak, I heard truth reflected in her voice. And so I invited her to have a conversation with me. And then here we are having this exploration together. So, Sarah, before we dive in, um, I would love to. I would love for you to introduce yourself. How do you want to be known?
Okay. Oh, how do I want to be known? That's a great question. Okay, so I'm Sarah Laverty. I'm dialing in from just outside the city of Belfast in Northern Ireland. And I am an embodiment coach. So I specialize in helping women to get out of their heads and into their bodies to develop unshakable self-trust and confidence. And at the moment, I am really zeroing in on procrastination and turning procrastination from your worst enemy into your best friend. But how I would like to be known generally, I suppose, is as someone that when you're around them, you really feel like anything is possible. Because prior to my embodiment work, and not even prior, currently, I work as a political campaigner. I've been involved in political campaigning for a long time. And I guess how the two areas merge together for me is that when we get out of all the stories that our mind is telling us, we connect with the part of ourselves that's actually limitless and that knows that we can create anything that we can imagine. So that is how I would love to be known.
Wow. Okay, great. I love this. So, I have a couple of questions for you in terms of this notion of embodiment, because I agree with you that when we live from our heads, and most women do, most people on the planet do, there's a disconnect. It's like there's an intellect that's creating, but there's a disconnect from the body. And so
Hmm.
I would love to focus this conversation with you around this disconnect, around
Hmm.
what is mind and what is the
Hmm.
body,
Hmm.
how you experience embodiment and how it all connects to creating a meaningful life. So
Yeah.
let's start with, how did you get into embodiment work? Like, what was your
Yeah.
experience of coming into this work?
Yeah, great question. And I'll try and give you the shorter version because the longer one could last the entire day. But I lived a lot of my life in my head. So I was a very intellectual, analytical, very sensitive child. And I found a lot of solace in like my schoolwork and in studying. And as I came into adulthood, I started to really experience a lot more anxiety and OCD, and I was really, really sometimes struggling with. I wouldn't have recognized it with as anxiety at the time. Well, I might have recognized it as anxiety, but not OCD. But now I can look back and see that it definitely was. And basically, all of the strategies that I had developed as a child for dealing with overwhelming feelings of running up into my mind and disconnecting from those feelings, they gradually started to not work. And I started to experience a lot of anxiety, particularly in my relationships, my romantic relationships, and started to become aware that I really wasn't functioning very well. Now, the first moment where I think I took a step towards embodiment actually occurred when I found out that I had a rare heart condition in my mid 20s and I needed to get fitted with a pacemaker. I had lost my dad to heart disease when I was a teenager. So this was like a deeply traumatic experience. It really came out of nowhere. And about 2 days after, no, 2 or 3 days after I found out about that, I had my first panic attack. So I'd had lots of anxiety prior to that, but I hadn't experienced panic. And I had a panic attack pretty much every day for the next 9 months. So the way I describe that time is that life gave me a challenge that I couldn't think my way out of. I could not wrap my head around this knowledge with what was facing me. And I started out of complete necessity learning about the nervous system and learning about what is happening in the body when you're experiencing intense stress and intense distress. And basically, I had a moment where I started tackling things from the level of the body without trying to figure things out, first of all. And I was amazed to discover that that it worked, that I was able to navigate my life better and I was able to come to new perspectives when I tended to the body, first of all. So that was the first step in that direction. And then a few years after that, when I had a bit of a flare up of some of the anxiety, the relationship based anxiety. And by this stage, I now knew, okay, now I can see the mind patterns that are keeping me stuck. Now I can see the way my attention runs straight up into my mind and I try to disconnect from what I'm feeling. I have this awareness now that there's something else going on here, and I ended up stumbling upon embodiment work. I kind of stumbled my way into a group called Healing Embodied that takes an embodied based approach to handling relationship anxiety. And it was like someone had just torn back the veil on my life. It was incredible. I remember I had my first embodiment meditation with them, and they asked me to identify what was happening in my body. Now, I'd done years of meditation and yoga, but I had never been asked to truly interpret the language of my body, these sensations in my body. And my answer was, I have no idea. I have no idea what's happening in my body. And that was a light bulb moment of no wonder life feels so hard when I can't navigate what's going on in my body. And I suppose from that point on, it was just like a complete love affair with embodiment.
Mm, wow, that's beautiful. So there's a few different directions we could take this, and
Mm,
I am curious about. So first of all, I think there's a similar trajectory with women that discover this line of um, this way of being, right? Like where
mhm,
embodiment actually becomes important because you realize when I'm living from my intellect, from my head, from my cultural conditioning, all that's available to me is that version of the story.
yeah.
That version of the story keeps repeating itself and then intensifies the more I
Hmm.
stay in it.
Hmm.
So I had a similar experience in terms of the panic attacks and the anxiety, and I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and and all kinds of different things, anxiety, depression, the normal ones that
Hmm.
most women are medicated for. And the realization that the pain lives in the body, right? The
Hmm.
realization that the pattern lives in the body and it needs to be interrupted in and through the body is an
Yes.
essential realization. So for me, before we explore what embodiment is, I'd like to kind of break it down into the smaller chunks to get to what embodiment is, because it's a very um, meaningful word I that people hear, and I don't know how much of it actually lands.
Yeah. It's an experiential thing. It's really hard to understand until you've experienced it, and yet we do have to talk about it as well. And so, yeah, it's challenging for people to understand. And I also think, so in some ways, embodiment is more simple than we make it than it can be made out to be. But we have been so conditioned away from it in our society that it becomes difficult.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm seeking to get to, right? Because the conditioning says you got to figure it out. You
Hmm.
have to come up with the analytical, logical, reasonable way to get from point A to point Z, and the body doesn't
Hmm.
work like that, right? Like
Hmm.
the body is. Let's talk. What is the body? So, from where you stand, what is the body, and what makes it so powerful in
Mm.
integration? And
Mm. Okay, so I think first of all, it's important to note that when I talk about the body, I'm not only talking about the physical body. The modality of embodiment that I'm trained in is feminine embodiment coaching, and we speak about different levels of the body. So you've got the physical body, you've got the mental body, you've got the emotional body, and you've got the energetic body. And you can also sort of talk about the kind of the soul, like the universal body that's kind of running through all of that. But I think the important thing whenever people think of the body, and when we're talking like colloquially, it's anything, I suppose, that's going on at a deeper level than your conscious thinking mind. Whenever I sometimes break it down for people of you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to get that new business strategy up and running next week, but your body is, your stomach squirming and you're feeling this sense of dread. So it's the stuff that's going on there. And I really like it's become, I think, I can't remember who sort of coined this phrase, but the body can be described as a manifestation of the subconscious mind. So the body is essentially an expression of our subconscious. And so it's everything that lies underneath this level of consciousness, which means that it's made up of our beliefs, our values, our past, our stories that we have gathered through time, and also our automatic responses. So ways that we have learned to navigate this world that we're in. The body is essentially a part of us that helps us move through the world, even whenever we're not aware of all the ways that it's helping us to navigate the world. Does that kind of answer where you're going?
Yes, I love that because from my perspective, the essence of what I am wears the body in order to have an experience,
Mm,
right? And the body is not one thing. So depending on which filter we're looking at the body through, our eyes, our physical eyes see the physical body, but there's lots of people that see quote unquote auras, right? Like they see
mm,
the energetic framing, if you will, of
yeah,
what surrounds the body. So
yeah.
when we're focused on what you see is what you get, I think we miss out on the deeper layers that actually live and, as you said, shape how the body
Mm,
has an experience and how I, as the person in the body, have my experience. So there's something very interesting that has happened, and I love your framing within cultural conditioning and beliefs. So I want to talk about that in a moment. But there's something that happens in that where particularly women are trained to disconnect from our bodies and
yeah,
not think about our bodies, right? Like not
yes.
think that it's a powerful mechanism to have a full experience of what it means to be a human and what it means to be alive.
Mhm,
And then there's this whole notion around we don't think about the body processing food.
mhm,
We don't think about the body, um, for example, in gestation. The body does what it's designed to do, and the body is powerful at doing the things that it's designed to do.
mhm.
So from where you stand, from your experience and you're working with yourself, what actually gets in the way for
Mm,
for the body to do what it's designed to do?
yeah. I love that. And first of all, I love your description of the body as the body is, the vehicle, that the essence wears to have its experience. I love that. And also, I think I do bring an interesting perspective to this because I physically was diagnosed with a condition in which my heart wasn't working correctly. And so I think I developed kind of I don't know. Basically, I am incredibly grateful that I was diagnosed with that condition now. I am incredibly grateful. Yes, it's unpleasant. Yes, I don't like going for my pacemaker checks, and I don't like that I'm going to have operations for the rest of my life to replace that pacemaker until they finally develop one that you can just get recharged like your electric car. But although according to the medical system, my heart was malfunctioning, my heart, so the actual condition that I am diagnosed with is called heart block. And I had been experiencing troubles in relationships for years up to that point, and I physically felt like my heart was blocked. I really did in terms of love and emotion, even though, I hadn't taken a single step towards embodiment work at the point when I was diagnosed with that. But the second they said the name of the condition, part of me went, oh, this is not just physical. There's something that's being called to here. And essentially, because of the experiences I had around that and after it, I was completely forced to learn how to care for myself, to be loving towards myself, and to be kind to myself, kind of for the first time in my life. Like I really had to prioritize myself, like I never had before. And so I think it's just a beautiful example of how even when the body looks like it isn't working, it it actually is on a larger level. If we come at it from a higher perspective, we can choose to see that it is functioning in a different way. Now, I think you asked me, what gets in the way of the body functioning like as it is supposed to. And I do believe so we have the power, our conscious mind has the power to override some of our innate instincts and to create a program within ourselves which creates a different pattern. And this is really, really valuable because when I move house, I would like my automatic processing system to be able to update my drive home from work. That's a good thing. And we all know that's like a really relatable example because we all know that the first time you go to do that drive home, you're going to take a wrong turn. You're going to automatically go down the wrong street because your body has stored that information deep down so that you don't have to consciously think about it and use that energy all the time to help you to go through your day. And when you want to upgrade that or when you want to change that, you're going to have to go through a little process where it becomes different. Now, when we grow up in the society that we are currently in, and I'll speak to the experience of women because that is what you've referred to. Women grow up in a world where we are taught that our bodies are a problem and that our bodies need to be fixed and adapted to fit an expectation and to fit a mold, which quite often is either more like a man's body or just less inconvenient to the needs of society. So a woman's need for rest throughout a menstrual cycle is diminished, disregarded. A woman's need for that same rest and recovery after birth is also diminished. It is disregarded. And there's also, there's a lot of cultural encouragement for women to disregard and ignore our deeper instincts. We think about, you know, we know when that man in the room is being creepy and uncomfortable, and yet we there are many situations in life where we are taught to be nice, to be accommodating, and yes, there is sometimes we do that out of a survival response. Sometimes it is a better survival response to be nice to the man at the bus stop for long enough until you can get away, and there's zero shame whatsoever in any of that. But there are also scenarios where where we are taught to keep ourselves in a situation that deep down we know is wrong for us and uncomfortable, because that is what is expected of us. So I think that these automatic programs get created whenever they're reinforced over time. They become adopted by the body as in the subconscious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in harmony with the natural way that life wants to flow through us. And we can, at some level, feel this innate tension within us, but we may suppress that to a certain level. And I think that what happens with a lot of women as they move through life is that usually they might get to a stage, perhaps in their 30s or their 40s, maybe their 50s, where that suppression that has been going on for a long time becomes rocked by something. And the deeper knowing that this isn't right starts to become louder and louder. And that can manifest through illness, but it can manifest through many other things, realizations that things aren't the way we want them to be. But that doesn't mean that those automatic programs of how to function in society automatically go away. And that's where, if we're not careful, we can turn in on ourselves and we can start blaming and shaming ourselves rather than recognizing that this is an automatic system that's been created. And if I want to live more in harmony with my deeper knowing, I'm going to have to unlearn and relearn a different way of being.
Mhm. Wow, there's so much there. Woo! Okay. Okay. So I just need a moment to just kind of let all of this move for myself because there's so much in there that keeps women in the struggle, right? It keeps, and men too, but I work with women. So it keeps women in the struggle. It keeps them holding on to what doesn't work because they're too afraid to actually take ownership of something else. And the domain of the unknown is the opposite of the habit, right? So what you're talking about, the automatic nervous system responses, those just happen, right? Like that's how, for example, you use the drive. I get to from point A to point B without ever thinking about it. I can listen to the radio. I can have a conversation with myself. I can have a conversation with another. But human beings are not here to live in that way all the time, right? So absolutely it's necessary, like you said, to get in the car to drive from point A to point Z, but we're here to be conscious of our choices. We're here to be mindful of our awareness. We're here to actually pay attention in and from the now so that we can actually create something that holds value for us. And when we're running from those habituated responses, all we can recreate is more of the past. So when you were talking about, basically tolerating that which we know is an inherent violation, right? Immediately, I see a young child that's been forced to repeat a false narrative about what's going on in their own family system. And I see this with women time and again, where 40, 50-year-old women are actually confused about, is this true or is this not true? Did this actually happen to me or did this not happen to me? And always, always what it boils down to, once safety is established in the conversation, I ask them a simple yes or no question. And in that yes or no, they're able to hear the truth of that moment and their body. It's through their body, right? The grounding deeply into the body. And the yes or no drops in, and then the next nanosecond is the but.
Mm,
So the encouragement for people like us that encourage people to own the truth is, let's focus on the yes or the no and build from that what's actually the story that you build around this yes or no. Because the story is not necessarily the truth. The truth is what you just experienced in and through the body. So in my understanding, in my experience, in my paradigm of the world, the body is the mechanism through which we actually are able to live in and from the truth of who and what we are. You cannot live from the truth from your intellect. You cannot live from the truth from your cultural conditioning because you might notice cultural conditioning changes by culture, by timeline, by where you are in the world. So there's a lot of factors, which means that it's not rooted in truth.
mhm,
It takes a lot for people to notice that and to begin to unpack that and to begin to give voice to that and to begin to trust that. So if my body is the vehicle through which I experience truth, and the next layer on top of that is, well, everything I've been told my whole life is don't trust the body. And the next layer on top of that is I will be punished if I trust the body. And the next layer on top of that is I don't trust what to trust. So it's like there's so many layers. So I'm curious about, how do you navigate those layers, particularly when it comes to deep emotions? And you mentioned shame here and in our exchange. So shame and its cousin fear, and the masking of all of this with rage and outrage and righteous rage and everything that's going on in the world is basically a representation of exactly that,
mhm.
right? Like the
Yeah.
interplay of all of this. So I'm curious about what what stands out for you on this, particularly around the body and consciousness and cultural conditioning and the mix of these things,
Mm,
and navigating this.
yeah. I think that I think I'll respond particularly to the part about trusting the body because that was a huge one for me, you know. Uh my anxiety and and OCD, the way that it manifested really did interrupt and create a lot of stress and difficulty in relationships that I was in. And when I was first stepping into this embodiment space, I had a heart that wasn't working. I needed to get fitted with a pacemaker, and I was having panic attacks every day. So I did not trust my body. As far as I was concerned, my body was having a complete collapse. And I remember saying to a therapist at one point, you know, I hated my body. I hated it with a passion. How dare it? If it wasn't for this, how am I supposed I was so deeply angry at my body because it felt like it was the source of so many of my problems in life. And if it could just be different, if it could just be better, then all of these problems I was having would go away. In fact, it's almost like my body was in the way of everything that I wanted to do in the world. And so, how did it get to be that a few years later, I went from I hate my body to I love my body so much. My body is my best friend. My body is my supporter, my guide. It's in my corner. My body is my biggest source of strength, and I can trust my body. And I think that the journey, it's I can't just give you a clear, oh, take, you know, the A, B, that equals C, because really it has to be a gradual journey. But I think that what happens is as we develop the capacity to actually feel, so first of all, feel the different sensations that are going on in our body. That's the first thing that I do with anyone who is coming to work with me is we start to understand how much are you able to actually feel what's happening in your body and spend a little bit of time with it because it sounds so basic. I remember a therapist telling me in my early 20s, "Oh, you don't really feel your feelings. You kind of think your feelings." But no one told me how to feel my feelings for another 8 years. I just carried on, and I had absolutely no idea how to actually do that. So what embodiment did was it actually gave me practical, tangible tools to be able to enter the space of my body and start to really feel what is happening there. And what I discovered through that was that a lot of the sensations that I was constantly running from that felt so awful, the horrible cloud of anxiety that I realized was also intermingled with grief and with so much pain. I had absolutely no idea how that actually felt. It had gone on for so many years that I had been avoiding this thing. It was like I was running from a person that I didn't recognize. You know, I didn't know what any of it actually felt like. And as I gained the ability to feel it. It's like I started to like piece it apart a little bit. I could kind of go, oh, there's that's a bit like sadness and when I'm there my chest compresses a little bit and that bit feels like my shoulders are heavy. And so now it wasn't just this big unknown cloud of scary stuff. Now it was actually I was adding texture to it. It had a bit more solidity. And now that it was a bit more solid, it was a bit less frightening. So I could spend a bit more time with it. And the more time I spent with it, the more I started to sense and feel that each of those sensations that felt so awful to me actually had some genuine wisdom and guidance for me. So the anxiety, and I think this is something which I think is a really, really important distinction to make when people come into this space, because people can sometimes hear the idea that, well, the body's full of wisdom, and that therefore that make that mean that every reaction your body has to the external world is inherently truthful, or more so that the interpretation that your mind makes of that is inherently truthful. And that is not the case. What is the case is that the body is all telling you the truth of what is going on within you at this moment. So the body, if you are feeling a real sense of unsafety, a deep, deep fear and a deep sense of unsafety, it may or may not be the case that you're actually in an unsafe environment right now. Over time, as you develop more of a relationship with your body, you'll be able to intuit more quickly when that genuinely is the case. But the important thing is that the message that it is giving you, that I don't feel safe right now, that is a truth that your body holds. And now you have the opportunity to respond when you take that seriously. So that means you can offer yourself what you need for your safety, what you need for your support. You can start to respond to your own needs. And over time, that starts to build trust with yourself. So does that I can't remember the fullness of all that you asked about, but does that sort of give like a bit of a clue into that aspect of like trusting the body?
Mm-hmm. I love the differentiation between what I'm going to call a survival response and
Mm,
a truthful in the moment response, because in our line of work, we say the answer is always yes. So it can be hard to differentiate if you're actually in danger. And, this happens a lot with people who are in this line of work, like transference will happen, right? And where somebody will um, have an internal state that they impose on an external circumstance or usually person, and then they believe that it's about that.
mhm,
So, what I hear you saying and how we work with that in our line of work in the Well Systems Institute is you take ownership of what's showing up for you. So if you're feeling unsafe, exactly like you said, it may be that you're actually unsafe, and it may be that there's something in the familiarity of that moment and that process and the way that you're navigating your existence in that exact moment that brings about that feeling of unsafe. And I believe it's showing up for integration, right? So part of it is learning to decipher, to unpack what might be the intelligence that was showing up right here, right now for me, because anything that's showing up in my awareness, in my life, is about me. I can only see the world through my perspective. And so, therefore, anything that I pay attention to, anything that I'm drawn toward, anything that is coming into my awareness is here for me, for my evolution, even when it doesn't feel good. Maybe especially then.
yeah. Yes. I've had many a scenario that at the time was the worst thing ever, and then I can look back and go, "Oh, that was actually that really helped me. That was really
Exactly.
important."
Exactly. So, my experience of it was kind of the opposite of yours, where I was seeking, oh, hi, I love the light. Yay.
Yeah.
Um,
It's getting a little darker right there now.
it's lovely. I love it. Um, where I was feeling so much that my body was in chaos and I wanted to escape the chaos. And so I started using drugs, and then drugs led to, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So it's kind of like the good girl gone bad cliche for a reason, right? Because I
Mhm.
was trying desperately to escape my body, trying desperately to escape my moment, trying desperately to escape my thoughts on a loop.
Mhm.
So what I've come to discover since then is a lot. But one of the things is that our minds have something like 65,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine. Yeah.
I was at a conference recently where I presented that fact, and they were all healers in that space. And then I followed that up with the fact that around 95% of those thoughts repeat on a loop, right? So, like, ask anybody, what's a new thought you've had today? How many people actually have a new, original, compelling thought? And then the third part of that was that 80% of those thoughts are actually quote unquote negative thoughts. So the passion with which you said, I hated my body, is familiar to me and is familiar to all the women that I work with and all the people that are seeking to become more than those thoughts try to convince them that they are. So, your language around gaining a higher perspective from our line of work is that there is a predictable structure to thought. So it's structured. Our thought processes are structured, and how it works is predictable. So learning how to go up levels of thought, so how to go up, well, levels of thought is what it's called, and choosing from who we're becoming as opposed to who we've been is essential.
Mhm.
People don't know what that means, nor do they know how to actually access that internal state that allows them to begin to get curious. So, actually, that's a really good word. Um, but I would love for you to maybe unpack a little bit. So, the more I go up logical levels, the more curious I am about myself and my thoughts and my body and how I function and what's showing up and why it's showing up and how it's meaningful and all this sort of stuff. The more conscious I become of the moment, the truth of the moment, and separating that from the conditioning of the past and the anxiety of the future, but being in the moment is essential. And as I move up logical levels and I get curious about what else is here for me to discover, I notice that evolution is layered. So you wouldn't be where you are without the layers of curiosity, staying with what's showing up, embodied, and then integration, right? And then the cycle sort of goes on, and it allows you to get to know yourself more deeply and more intimately. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it does. And for anyone, listening, I suppose to know that this is not a linear process. This is absolutely not something that happens in a very cohesive way, but I also think it's something that we're designed for. So if we actually are simply in the experiencing of life, whether or not we have knowledge of this way of operating, this will often happen when we are allowing ourselves to fully experience the life that we are in. It's simply a case of learning, oh, this way of doing it didn't work. I'll try a different way of doing it. And I think that does happen naturally.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's curiosity based, right? So, like, whatever it is that you're curious about in that moment, you follow that thread, and that thread leads you to the next thread, which leads you to the next thread. So, none of it is none of it is wasted. None of it is unimportant. Like, it's all part of the trajectory of building to who you have now become. So, given that line of inquiry, I'm curious about who do you hold yourself to have now become, given your whole journey from where you started to where you are now?
Ooh, interesting. Who do I hold myself to have become? Well, obviously it's a continual evolution, but I think that the answer I gave at the beginning comes somewhat close to it, of that, being an expression of the limitless nature of our world. And I think, okay, so to put it this way, as I mentioned, I've been involved in political campaigning for a long time. And so I suppose I came to my coaching experience. My observation is that quite a lot of coaches maybe are operating in the field of the individual, and then they start to become aware of the cultural and the social and the external and how that contributes to it. But I kind of went the other way. I was very aware of and attuned to the cultural dynamics, the institutional, the systemic, and I was working on that basis. I know that, say, political campaigning is kind of broad. So I was working in some feminist movements, volunteering in them. I worked for the National Students Union for quite a long time, which is wonderful because students are really innovative and creative and they've got great ideas. And so I was very much in the field of how do we organize the external world in such a way that it can be what I want it to be? So that if I can change the world to be like this, then I can experience this.
Mm.
That was the orientation that I was operating within. And that is something that we often do in our own lives as well. If I can just get this amount of money, then I can feel abundant. If I can just find this type of partner, then I can feel safe and romantic and in love and all of that. We try to organize the external conditions of our life so that we can feel a certain way. And what embodiment did, and I know that you know this, is embodiment flips that on its head. When you start to get into the body, you become aware that everything that you are creating in the world and that you are receiving from the world quite often, because we have a lot more agency over what we receive than we may think we do. But all of that is kind of finding its start point within us. So if we are rejecting subtly those sensations that we're craving, if we're like our the actual orientation of, well, I'll get that amount of money and then I'll feel abundant. That is us rejecting the ability to experience that sensation right now. Because actually there is, unless, when especially when we start to get a little bit practiced in feeling different sensations, there's nothing that says that we can't allow ourselves to feel that way right now. It doesn't mean that it's easy in every way, but we can practice the sensation of that. So I think what started to happen over time, and I was more aware of it in my campaigning spaces in a way, was I was sort of looking at the work I was doing thinking, well, if I'm only going to let myself be joyful about the world, be happy with the society I'm living in, feel good about things, when we have achieved this, and this, and this, and this enormous goal, enormous dreams and desires, I'm going to spend my entire life exhausted and miserable, because to be honest, those things are really big and they may or may not happen in my lifetime. And doesn't it kind of suck? And especially because at that point I think I was one of them, and I was maybe finding myself more drawn to people in movements who were a bit cynical and who were always seeing the way that things weren't going well. And I think what started to shift was I started to realize that if I am trying to create this thing in the world so that I can feel good about the world, I am always starting at a loss. But what if I simply decide that this world can be wonderful? What if I locate that glorious world that I want to live in? What if I locate the feeling of that healthy world where our ecosystems have returned to their full flourishing? What if I locate the sensation of everyone of being allowed to be the fullest expression of themselves, and us creating societies around human well-being? What if I actually can locate a little nugget of that in myself and then just allow that to express itself out into the world? And what if I actually don't need anything around me to change right away? What if I just trust that me being that expression contributes to a wider shift in the world and allows that to be unlocked in other people as well? And so, to answer your question, which was like, who have I become or who am I becoming? I suppose what I like to feel that I am becoming, or I'm trying to step into, or I am allowing myself to step into, is I want to be the embodiment. I want to be the change I want to see in the world, which I think I've had a deeper understanding of what that phrase really means when I've come to embodiment of, I want to be the expression of the world that I want to live in, which means that I need to be aware at the various tiniest little micro levels that I create that which I don't want. And I
Mm.
want to shift that more into the world that I want to see, so that that world can come into existence through me, and I'm not waiting on the world to change before I get to feel that world.
Oh, yes. So much. Yes. Oh, I love everything about that because that allows you to take ownership of your life.
Yes. And it's very freeing, you know? When some of the political change making I do is around changes to legislation, working with so I'm in Northern Ireland. We have a very volatile political system. Our government has collapsed several times in the last few years. If I'm waiting on all of this to be a certain way for me to feel good, for me to be able to relax and enjoy this life, which is the only thing that allows me to have the motivation to keep participating in this type of work, then I'm setting myself up to fail. So whereas if it is actually located within me, then I regain my power. And I think this is what true empowerment is. It's when we take back the power from those external places and realize that actually it does lie within me. And it's not going to change the external circumstances immediately, but it's the only thing that actually truly has the power to change them in the long run.
Absolutely. And I think that's partially what terrifies so many people, like particularly women who are taught to be, be seen and not heard. Like, just wait for Prince Charming to come rescue you. He will kiss you when you're sleeping, and we will call that love, right? Like, so
Hmm.
this is the conditioning that we're exposed to, and so even the notion of taking responsibility for your own life is so foreign to so many women who are waiting for someone outside of them to come in and rescue them. And
Yeah.
often that comes in the form of a male, like a lover, a romantic partner, or sometimes in the form of a therapist or a coach or, somebody out there fix me and fix my life. And so many people are willing to take responsibility for fixing someone else's life. And I'm over here going, wait a minute, it's your life,
Hmm.
your creation. Your life is your creation, and how you choose to create your life will be a reflection of your internal state.
Yeah.
So
And
that
I resonate with that a lot in that that was me. I definitely wanted someone else to come along and fix it. You know, a
me
lot of
too.
my anxiety I can look back and see ways in which I wasn't a great partner because part of me wanted you to behave a certain way so that I could feel better about myself. And that's not to say that those partners were fantastic and I just wasn't seeing it. They were also not showing up in not great ways sometimes. But I was 100% taking like my responsibility. I was maybe sometimes drawn to the fixing role. If you're drawn to the fixing role, as I've often been, that's because when you're pouring all of your attention and energy onto somebody else, it's a really great way to ignore the stuff in your corner that could do with your attention, that could do with your time and with adjustment. So
Mm,
it's really daunting. Embodiment, I think, does force us to take responsibility for ourselves. And that can be terrifying and also incredibly liberating.
yes. Mostly liberating once you integrate the terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to mention, since you mentioned the fixer, I do have a quiz. It's called Truth or Trauma, and once I figure out how to drop it in the chat, maybe I'll just post it uh, in the recording after. But I say that because there's four different types of roles that we adopt growing up, and one of those is the fixer person. So the people you would have been drawn to with the campaign
Hmm.
and we gotta change the world.
I'm
Those are
gonna fix the world. I'm gonna save the world.
save
The
the
feel
day,
that, yeah.
the heroes of the planet, and it's like, well, are you though? So that's a yes. So I remember being the same, and I remember many times I spent 7 years in an abusive relationship, and during that time, I developed many addictive tendencies, and I realized once I left that space that who I was, right, who I showed up as, sustained that relationship in that way. So I would love to blame the Mister for his shortcomings, and there were many. But I was not bringing out the best in him because I was playing out my trauma with him and expecting him to soothe me.
Hmm.
So this notion of taking responsibility for myself is very, very, uh, at that time new, 17 years old, what would I know? But very new and now very empowering. And so how do you how do you navigate this notion of the terror that lives underneath the surface that's just out of reach for empowerment? So there's an interplay here, and I'm not sure I'm articulating it the way that I have it in my awareness, but I'm very mindful that there's an undercurrent of fear that always lives perhaps on top of empowerment, or I'm not sure if it's on top or if it's just underneath.
Yeah, I think that I mean, from my experience of all of this, from the, from the modality that I'm trained in, typically we go down through various levels, and then the true source, the truth, our truth, which is usually where our power is found at the bottom of that. So we
Mm,
kind of have to go through these different layers first of all to get to that, and that takes different amounts of time. I think that it's, first of all, when it comes to this area of personal responsibility, like we need to wrap it up in so much compassion, especially at the beginning, because you can actually, I think you can only take personal responsibility when you have started to cultivate a deep level of self compassion and love for yourself. If you're doing that before you have that, you're, it's too tempting to stray into criticism and self judgment, because I mean, I know that it has been, I have started being much more accountable, much more willing to look at my flaws, much more willing to look at the ways that I don't show up well when I have developed a much greater level of love and respect for myself, because I can now look at those and no longer see them as an indication of my inherent self-worth. They no longer are a judgment upon who I am at my core, because I now know that who I am at my core is so valuable, so sacred, so part of the essence and flow of life, that my worthiness and my value is not questionable. And so therefore it's safer to look at these different areas and these parts of me that are actually not going well, because it's no longer going to threaten my sheer existence in that way. So I think that that layer of compassion needs to come in from an early stage for for people to be able to go to that deeper level. And then usually there's a need to start and feel the reality of the situation that we are in. And people will often be surprised that they're not doing that, because they are having feelings. I thought that I was feeling the reality of my situation because I was feeling anxious a lot. I was feeling upset. I was feeling all of these different things. But often there's like surface feelings. So there'll be a surface level there'll be a surface level layer of anxiety. There'll be a surface layer level of guilt or shame around what's going on, and they can act a bit as a barrier to what's really happening underneath, because we're just about comfortable enough with these to be able to kind of approach them. We don't like them. So it's like our consciousness kind of goes, oh, that's uncomfortable. Right. I'll distract. I'll go over here. And we never end up getting to this deeper layer. And it's only when we start to actually slow down and allow ourselves to be fully present with these sensations, that they get the chance to move through us, that they get the chance to flow, and therefore we get to go to these deeper layers. And that all has to happen really gradually as well, depending on the severity of what's going on, so that we don't end up completely overwhelming the body. And I think that, in my experience, I think that there has been multiple times now in my life where I can look and go, I had a moment of, oh, this is what's really happening. And I had one of those in January about an area of life, of going, oh, I knew that I wasn't really happy in this area. I knew that this wasn't really working well, but actually, I'm just now letting myself feel it. And I've used, this is an experience. It's one of the best ways to understand what embodiment is, in my opinion, because there's definitely been a time in everybody's life where you've known something intellectually, but it's only just hit you. And when it's only just hit you, It means you felt it at a deeper layer. And what that means is that now you felt it, you can't go back from that. Like you can know in your head that that person in your life is unkind and they're mean and they don't treat you with respect. And you can tell yourself over and over, like you can have conversations with yourself where you know that they're treating you badly, but there'll be a moment where something happens that it really hits you that they do not value you. And from that moment, everything has to change because you have changed, because you have finally taken in the reality that you've been holding at a distance.
So I'm laughing because there's so many moments like that now in my life, but I want to share one where it was with my ex-boyfriend, which is when things became so real. So for 7 years, I battled my own internal state around staying and leaving, and I'd leave for 15 minutes and then come back, and you know how the story goes. And I remember this one time that I visited him in a different province across the country. And I spent 7 days basically in isolation. And on the last day that I was there, I'm sitting outside the university, smoking weed, enjoying the stars, which I don't do anymore. In fact, at that time, and I look over and there he is with another woman. And I thought to myself, wow. But it was it's such a soothing wow,
Hmm.
right? Because I knew for years this isn't working. This doesn't work. There's so much disrespect, etc. But that moment, it was like this like very intimate exhale of truth into my body. And my body was receptive of it in such a way that it was not receptive before. And because it landed in my body, it's like it dissolved, right? That relationship dissolved, how I held myself within it dissolved, how I held him dissolved. And so freedom was possible in that nanosecond, right? Like that nanosecond of the download. So I wanted to speak a little bit to the power of those moments because our bodies are designed, and I love the language that you use there. Our bodies are designed for such moments. In fact, we're designed to live from that space of quantum processing, right? Because we are processing energies that are at times paradoxical. And our bodies know how to do that without complicating the complexity of the moment because it is complex, but it does not need to be complicated. And our intellects take that in and they start to make it complicated. And so we spend, like in my case, 7 years trying to make a thing that would never make sense. So the speed of the body and its processing capacity when we create space is unfathomable. It is unfathomable to our intellect. And so giving oneself permission to relax into the power of the body without being terrified of what you'll feel. So sensations like shame, for example, that's I love your you get to hear and then you're like, oh, so look, pretty shiny over there. I'm gonna move over
Hmm.
anything to get away from the moment and the intimacy of the moment where the sensation that you're feeling is other than pleasurable, right? Like it's actually not where you want to be. And yet, in order to integrate that information that the shame carries, you have to be willing to be in the body. And the deeper you are in the body and the more space you create in the body, the easier it is for the sensation to flow without, or to move and flow without getting stagnated, without getting it becoming more real. So this leads me to the how we create our reality. So we create our reality from the perceptual filters that we carry about ourselves, about our body, about where to go in the moment where, let's pick on shame, shame shows up, right? Like to be to be willing to trust that there's information here for me in this moment and it's good for me. It's for my evolution. It's here as a friend, as a messenger. It takes a lot of staying with it and trusting it and staying with it and trusting it and staying with it and trusting it. And I think what makes the difference for some people who are willing is that they're no longer willing to live the old way, right? That old way no longer exists for them and they don't know, okay, well, if that doesn't work, well, then what happens now? So in that, what happens now, we look for an alternative way to live. And embodiment is one of those ways, which I believe is essential to creating the quality of our lives. Because when you live from your body, you can't not know the truth.
Yeah.
You may not like it, but you can't not know it.
Yeah. So I think I love that because that is when you do become more sensitive. Okay, so my during my teacher training for my coaching certification, I had so many like big realizations about my life. I ended up leaving the job that I was in. I loads of things happened, and what was funny though was that this is a common thing for everyone who goes through the course. Most people who go through the course um end up in some big life transition at some point during it because there's a really strong emphasis. And I'll say, I was trained by the School of Embodied Arts, and I have a really high value for the quality of the training I received. And I'm actually in the level 2 program at the moment for my certification. And there's a really strong emphasis put on personal mastery. On your own personal practice. There is, it's very firmly a principle of the work that you can only go as deep with your clients as you have gone with yourself, and that your own personal practice and your own personal willingness to experience and explore those parts of yourself is not just, a good part, it's actually essential. I remember at one point there was almost a, if you're not using a particular tool on yourself, probably if you haven't in a while, don't use it with your clients because you need to really be in tune with the nuances that are there. Um, and so yeah, during that program, I ended up leaving a job that was no longer right for me. And it was one of those moments where I really went deep and I just felt that really quiet knowing in my body I need to leave this. And I'd been kind of knowing this intellectually, and it had been filled with lots of tension, but it became this just quiet rising knowing. But this is the thing. So many of the people who go through this course have these moments and these realizations because when you are spending a lot of time in your body, you simply cannot continue to accept the situations that you have been accepting up to that point. Because the only way that you have been accepting them up to that point is you have been holding yourself apart from the full depth of them. And so this is why I think that embodiment is such an important part of where we are at in the world in the moment. Because if we were all allowing ourselves to be in our bodies, we as a society would no longer be able to tolerate the level of pollution that we have in our world. We would no longer be able to tolerate the intensity of work that is expected of our bodies to continue to output under a capitalist system. We would no longer be as spellbound by the stories that we have to be spellbound by to accept the idea that people are fundamentally different and should be treated differently because of their gender or their skin color or their sexuality. We this sense of separation is given to us through stories. And yes, when we go into the body, we do come into contact with those operating systems. Those beliefs do live within us and they are a felt sense. But the experience that I've had of myself and the experience that I've seen with lots of my clients is that when you bring your conscious awareness to what is going on within you, to those deeper beliefs and how they're manifesting in the body, you develop awareness starts to come about quite quickly about what is actually true and what has been given to you, or what is no longer true. Sometimes a belief has been driving our behavior for a really long time, but when we finally allow ourselves to really feel it, to really sit with it, to really experience the fullness of it, we can like see through it and realize, oh, that was never true. That was never the truth of what was really going on. So embodiment does fundamentally change how we move through our lives. And I suppose that is what changes what we create in the world, because a lot of, I mean, you're using the example of relationships. So a lot of the time, there are things nowadays, there are things that I accepted in older relationships, like past relationships, that if you were to put me face to face with somebody right now who had some of those traits and qualities, this has happened recently. I am a single woman, so I am like going on dates and, things like that. If you bring me face to face with those qualities now, I will be like, no, goodbye. And that's the difference. That's the difference in what creates results. Because previously, I would have accepted it, I would have tolerated it, and I would have shaped my behavior in such a way that to orientate to how do I maintain the relationship as the primary, like maintaining the relationship was the more important thing. So, how do I adapt to what is being given to me here? Whereas now, and I'm sure I'll continue to go through a process of different things over time that I'm willing to accept and not. But there are, yeah, certain qualities or behaviors in men that I see now that I will just be like, nope, not for me. Goodbye. And so as a result, the quality and the standard of my relationships continue to improve. They continue to get better because I'm no longer accepting certain things that I would have accepted in the past. And I think that embodiment does that for us in all areas of life. It helps us to set the standard for what we tolerate and accept in our workplaces, in our environment, in our homes, in our relationship with different things, like our relationship with money, our relationship with time, our relationship. And it's always a constant process. But when we are having that, it, the body, it's almost like the body knows what to do next, even when the mind can't figure it out. Your mind will create all of these reasons that it's going to be so complicated and difficult to do something, whereas the body will just like experience something and know and be like, no, go over here. And if we can just bring more, I'm not advocating that people completely disregard the wisdom from the mind. There are, there's times where it's very useful to bring some of that in. But if we can bring in more of that wisdom from the body, which we do when we start to trust it more, if we can bring in more of that, we will find ourselves creating more of the experiences that we actually want to have in our lives by default.
Yes, I love that. Particularly this notion of, do we tolerate what we have? Because that's one way to move through the world. And another way is to actually create what we want, which then begs the question, well, what do I want?
Yeah.
And in order to discover what I want, I have to be both willing and able to hear the life force that I am communicating with my body. And in the moment that I know that truth, I cannot not know it.
Hmm.
So I agree with you with the conscious mind has a function, right? That the conscious mind is here to be able to choose, to be able to say, I hear, stay with the body while the body's processing. And when the body's done processing, the conscious mind actually makes a congruent choice that is not an away from pain, but it's a move toward what's meaningful for us to create. And
Yes.
when I hear you speaking about these relationships, I know I've been through the process, and that's exactly how I found my husband. The nanosecond that something felt off in my body, it's like, not going to go there ever again. And so recreating that over and over and over in my life, like, I do not want to tolerate a shitty existence. I want to live a magnificent, meaningful, expansive, evolutionary life. And this is what it takes.
Yeah. And I think we entitled this talk as uh, something to do with the body's no. I think our no is what creates our yes. I think
Mhm.
that the our no our we have to allow ourselves, and I think that this is something, if I was speaking to somebody who was starting this process, and I think earlier on in the conversation you said about, whenever people are starting to have this awakening that there are things in their life that they're not happy with, that they've maybe suppressed up to a certain point, and they're now starting to come to this. I think we need to be patient enough with ourselves to allow ourselves to sit in the no for a while without needing the yes to be there yet. It's okay to know that I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want this.
Mm.
I don't know what the next step is, but I know that this is not working. And I've had that happen in things even recently. There's an area of work that I'm involved in where I had kind of a deep moment of acceptance of, okay, I do want to do this, but not the way I've been doing it. And I kind of came to peace with that. I didn't know. I think up to that point, I was trying to figure out, like, but what's the right way? Like, what's the way I do want to do it? And I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. And as soon as I came into acceptance with that, little opportunities started coming to me, which started to guide me more down the path of
Mhm.
how I actually wanted to operate. But I needed to let go of the struggle, first of all. I needed to come into acceptance of this is what is, and my no is enough right now, and trust that the next step will come from there. And I don't have to figure that out first in order to be able to accept what is here.
Oh my gosh, I love talking to you. Yes, exactly to everything you just said. So, so many women, and I think there's an uprising of sorts, and it's quiet and it's intentional and it's happening, right? Like
Mm,
it's like the fabric of what we used to call reality is unraveling, and
mm,
people are noticing the unraveling. And in the unraveling, they're noticing that they're playing a part in it. So they may not know how they're playing a part in it or how to contribute to it, but they know that it's unraveling and they're playing a part in it. And so, in the staying with the unraveling, in the not knowing, right? Like, I don't have to know how it's unraveling or what's going to be next. I just know that something's happening and it's deep and it's powerful and it's intimate and it's changing. So, my evidence of this is in the number of women's voices that are making themselves visible and audible in their communities and in their homes, not to change the outcome of the community, but to be truthful in the moment that they're in. I think that's really a powerful place to be because that's exactly how we create the reality that we don't even necessarily know that we want. But exactly like you said, if we stay if we stay in the I don't know, I know I don't want that, which is a process in and of itself to get to, right? To know that I don't actually want this thing that I always thought I would, and I've been holding on because it's what I've been trained to do. Well, now that I know that I don't want that, I'm not going to jump to the outcome of what I'm going to create. I'm going to stay in the process of integration and creation. And in that, something usually spectacular emerges, right? Like something like that idea of I'm no longer going to do my old work. I'm no longer going to show up with the same people I used to show up with. I'm no longer going to have the same conversations I used to. I'm no longer going to participate in the quote unquote realities that people hold as real when I know they're not. I'm going to focus my intentionality. I'm going to focus the power of my attention and intention in creating something other than the status quo. Because the status quo, quite frankly, is failing all of us and has for a very long time. And maybe things have to get really bad before they get better. I know for sure at an individual level, it had to get pretty bad for me in order to really continuously choose other than what I thought would keep me safe, you know? So, man, we could talk about this. I wrote down separation, this notion of separation, right? Where it's like
mhm,
we're what the conditioning teaches us that we are versus what we actually are. And maybe that's a good one to end this conversation on, this
Mm.
notion of separation, because I believe, and this is what my book is all about, is that where upcoming book, um, where we run into trouble is when we think that we're separate.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
what's your take on this?
Yeah. Um, yes. And we are at the final question. I'm just going to warn you, my phone battery is getting rather low, but it should last a little bit longer to get to here. Um, okay, so gonna try and how do I put this? And I think that it's first of all, it's very difficult to trust that larger process if you don't have some sense of a higher power. And I think that in order to have that higher power, it doesn't mean that you have to, believe in a particular God or have a religion or anything like that. When I was first going through all of this process, I would have called myself agnostic. I was always like, kind of rejecting religion. I didn't really have any kind of relationship with something higher than myself. But when I was facing, my heart condition, I suppose it brought everything really, really into like close focus because I had essentially had a condition at the time that I was told I'm at higher risk of sudden adult death syndrome than the average person. So my body could just go into cardiac arrest more suddenly than someone else. And when someone tells you that, how are you supposed to try? How are you supposed to build a future? It's like, okay, great, one breath, a lot of the things they tell you to try and soothe your feelings around panic attacks is to go and get your heart checked. And when you find out your heart is fine, then to always remind yourself that, you're okay. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at all. And I suppose it required me to develop a deeper trust in my enlivened body than I had previously. So I had to essentially meditate, and I say had to, I mean forced to. I had no choice, right? I had to almost meditate on the fact that, yeah, my heart isn't working right, but it is beating right now. There is something that has made, and I don't want to humanize this, but like made the decision, there is something that has decided that that I'm going to awake today, that blood is going to pump through my body, that blood is going to move through my veins, that my organs are going to function. And I have no conscious control over any of that. I have no conscious control over whether I wake up tomorrow. I have no conscious control over anything that is happening. And I suppose it enabled me to start trusting in a higher power without feeling like I needed to now believe in a God. Now, I do now, actually, I would be quite spiritual now. I do have a felt sense of an experience of a God, but it has been a very embodied one. It's not been I'm trying to make myself believe something. It has been constantly having this feeling in my body that there is a flow of life moving through me that is beyond me, that's bigger than me, that's more than me. And when I'm really out of my thinking mind and I'm deeply in the body, I do have that feeling of connection to everything else. I was having like, I'm in a really busy period of work right now, and I did just take myself down to the sea. I live about 10 minutes away from the sea. I'm very fortunate. Um, I sat on the beach the other morning and I just sat quietly with the sea, and I kind of had this realization of, and I say a realization that comes over and over and over again the more you do it, of I am part of all of this. I am part of this living, breathing earth, and this life force that enlivens everything in our earth is moving through me just as much as it is moving through everything else. So if you can allow yourself to meditate on that and have even a level of appreciation for it, you don't need to believe in any particular thing, but if you can have a trust in the fact that the earth goes through natural cycles, things happen in nature that no one is making happen, but it's all just symbiotically moving together, you can start to cultivate the idea that maybe humans are not so apart from that. And maybe when we're seeing this massive uprising all around us, And we are seeing this uprising. And I think I saw it in Ireland perhaps earlier than it was happening in some other places. There was a lot of feminist uprising across the island. There was referendums on abortion legislation, but it was also at a time where there was just a huge outpouring of more women speaking in public spheres. We've even had, the patron saint of Ireland has always, been St. Patrick, but actually St. Bridget is also a really important figure in the island as well. And she has now been reinstated as like a bank holiday so there's been this, it's like this enlivening of the feminine force has been arising. And I think that if we can allow ourselves to see us as part of a larger intelligent life force, a cultivation of life that is moving through the planet, it's like we can let go of the outcomes a little bit more, and it becomes easier to simply do what you said of just show up in our truth and trust that there's a bigger process going on, because you can look at the world right now and compare it to an individual person's life. And I do think sometimes we need to go really, things need to go dark, or we need to let all the darkness that's already there come up to the surface in order to reckon with it, in order to really face it and see it and integrate it, and then move forward in a decision of who do we actually want to be. And it's my belief, it is my feeling that there is a collective global process that is going on, that is simply an evolution of life, of kind of a when you've been living in a certain way for so long and it's just not working, like climate change being like a physical example of that, of like the way you are extracting from the earth is just not working. And so therefore you have a reaction, like a reaction will come in response to that. I think that if we can allow ourselves to lean back into this sense that there is a grander flow, then we can trust that we don't have to have it all figured out. And we don't have to know what the next step is going to be. And we don't have to know what we're going to create next, but that there is something emerging through us. And Adrienne Marie Brown's a really good writer on this. She has a book called Emergent Strategy, of the idea of allowing what is present in this moment to emerge from the moment. And it's a very empowering place to be. So I think that that is where a lot of us are finding ourselves within the space of unraveling. But it's within the unraveling that you find the part of yourself that can't be unraveled. And when you move from that place, what we create in the world is very different.
And that speaks to the heroine's journey as opposed to
Mm,
the hero's journey, right? So
yes, good point. Yeah, going within rather than
mhm.
going out. Yeah.
Yeah, and noticing all the challenges of that route. So one of the things, thank you. Um, One of the things that stands out for me in my experience over the last 8 years of uh, my own personal and collective evolution with myself and other women that I worked with is that I am not separate from the entity that we call life force. Right?
Hmm.
I am that thing itself. And Nassim Haramen's work specifically around um, the field talking to and with itself. You and I, that's what we are. We are the field having an experience of itself through each other, enter a holographic expression of reality. So that's a whole nother very interesting conversation. But I really feel like it's important for me to share that in integrating notions of separation is where I found my wholeness, right? Like I am not separate from whatever it is that I call a higher entity. I am the higher entity manifesting in this body.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Sarah. I've had
Thank you.
lots of fun talking to you and with you. And despite our hiccups, still we have we're here, we did it. I would like to share once I figure out how to share in the chat. I don't even know how to find the chat, but I would like to share your quiz, and I would love for
Mhm.
you to maybe end this exploration with. Well, how can people find you so they can follow you on Substack and they can or subscribe to your Substack, subscribe to me on Substack and have these, explorations more often. But where can people find you?
Yeah, okay. So probably don't follow me on Substack because I don't really use it. I might one day. This is an old account. So probably don't follow me there. Follow me on Instagram. I'm embodiment underscore with underscore Sarah. You can also access my website, embodimentwithsarah.com. And we've gone into like such deep conversations here. And then whenever you go to my work, you see me talking about procrastination and, like pursuing goals. And I want to make it really clear that I think all of those things are so interconnected. So I bring that depth to the work that we're doing around these things. I think that the reason I think procrastination is so significant is because it is one of those topics that in which those micro ways that our shaming of ourselves, our extraction of the body, our disregard and our mistrust of the body show up in really subtle ways day in day out. And I truly believe that if you can change your relationship with procrastination, it will have a knock-on effect in how you change your relationship with everything and how you change your relationship with creation. And I think that we need, when we are in this stage where we are unraveling the world that we are in and we're starting to build a new world, we need to learn the skills of how do we pursue and create in the world in a way that is not extractive of ourselves, but instead is expressive of who we are. So the work I do is largely around procrastination, building that little dream, that little desire that's tugging at your heart. And it allows us to start and approach some of this really deep work in a way that feels more accessible and provides really notable like lessons and anchors that we can anchor into, because I'm sure Stella and I both have we've we've had experiences that show up maybe in your day-to-day work or in a relationship or something that just teaches you this lesson that suddenly you take into every other area that you do. So do you want me to mention the quiz now, the procrastination
Yeah.
archetype quiz? Yeah, sure. And I'm getting a notification from my phone about my battery, so I will keep it short. But the procrastination archetype quiz is the little freebie that I have on my website, which I'd encourage you to try out. So this is to help you to see which part of you might be driving your procrastination right now. Is it your inner protector? Is it your inner winter or your inner rebel? The point is, it is a friend. It is not something that's out to get you or causing havoc. It's actually got a lot of love and wisdom for you. So you can take the free quiz, find out which one is driving it right now, and you'll also be added to my newsletter where you can hear about what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this podcast is called Boundless Leader Self. And in order to actually embody that and to live from that, we have to integrate the stuff that gets in the way. And I think that's exactly the point of what you're doing, right? It's like that integration of all the stuff that gets in the way. So thank you so much for this exploration. I mean, there's so many different directions we could go, and I love the direction that it went. Um, do you have any final words for our listeners before we?
My final words is just your body has your back, even when it feels like it doesn't. There's so many times that I get annoyed at my body. Even now that I know that it's got my back, it's resisting something or it is I'm just not feeling the way I want to be feeling. But when I dive deeper, I always discover that there is something valuable there that it was trying to tell me. And I think your body really is, it's kind of like your GPS system that's guiding you towards yourself. And it might be blinking and telling you to turn around when you're going the wrong way, and that can be annoying, but actually it really is your biggest supporter. So spending learning the skills, and it really is a skill. It's not something to shame yourself that you don't know how to do. It's simply a skill that you have to learn. Learning the skills of how to be in your body is something that you will never regret.
Mm, yes, exactly that. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I wholeheartedly agree.
Hmm. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sarah. Have a spectacular day.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody, for being here, for listening, and for staying on. And go ahead and take Sarah's quiz, and you can go ahead and take my quiz and follow us and like us and all the stuff and share it. Apparently, that's effective. Sharing the message is effective. All right. Have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon.